We're live.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's Wednesday, January 14th, and this is House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. We are continuing our testimony on H527, an act relating to extending the sunset of 30 VSA 248A. And we're going to hear this afternoon from our wireless providers. So I'm Representative Kathleen James from Manchester.
Scott Campbell from St. Johnsbury.
Richard Bailey, Lamoille 2.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Bennington.
Michael Southworth, Caledonia 2.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Derek Torrey, Washington 2.
Graham Kleffner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Laura Spelling, Wyndham 2.
All right, and in the room.
Julian DiBona from the Vermont Chamber. Claire Buckley from Leonine Public Affairs representing CTIA.
Chris Rice from MMR here on behalf of Verizon.
Dana Lee Perry, New Craftsman.
Great. And we're introducing ourselves.
Hello, Nick Sherman with Leonine Public Affairs on behalf of AT&T.
All right, thanks, Nick. All right, we have invited three witnesses to speak with us today. And I don't know if you all have a preferred order, but we can turn it over to you.
Yes, Madam Chair, I believe the consensus was for me to go first, if that works for everybody.
Sounds good. So for the record, if you could introduce yourself.
Absolutely. My name is Jeremy Crandall. I'm here on behalf of CTIA, representing the Wireless Industry Trade Association in support of House Bill 527. I will just say at the top, thank you for the opportunity to present remotely to you all. I enjoyed joining you all in the committee room last year on another wireless topic. It is good to see you all again. The sun is also kind of creeping to my right here as I go here, so forgive me on that. But yeah, so as I dive in, I do want to begin by level setting a little bit from a provider perspective, the kind of work that we are ultimately talking about as it relates to Vermont's 248A siting law. I have been listening to the dialogue for the last couple of days, and so I wanted to start there. So at its core, from our perspective, siting of a cell tower is technical, it's complicated, it's expensive, and most of all, it is admittedly a time-intensive endeavor. The average length of time to site a tower from the inception of an idea to put a tower somewhere to its actual activation to serve the community where it's placed, that customarily spans, give or take, about 2 years. And I want to go a little deeper on what that actual work looks like on the ground. And so, in no particular order, it begins, though, with analysis of engineering, surrounding sites and locations, local traffic and population, and I would say just as importantly, its expected growth, both at the time and then its expected growth into the future. For the tower itself, every proposed site has to be evaluated for environmental concerns, construction constraints, safety and security, and other elements. Every cell tower is required to comply with FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, environmental regulations. There have to be evaluations of impacts on wetlands, stormwater management, drainage, and other elements. And then there also is required pre-construction reviews that have to be completed by qualified experts to ensure compliance with the environmental, these are federal, on the federal side, Environmental Protection Act, Historical Preservation Act, Endangered Species Act, and then any federal aviation rules or impacts as well. Now, you'll notice that thus far, I haven't even said anything about Vermont's 248A requirements just yet. Now, as you've all heard, and I will expand upon a little bit here, as you know, there are a range of built-in processes and mandates that are specific to Vermont that are placed on our companies when we do undertake a project. But I do want to emphasize this point for you all as we discuss this. It's to really emphasize that it is in the best interest of our companies for this process, which is just as capital intensive as it is time intensive. It's important for us for this process and ultimately deployment to be both effective and successful. We want that site to effectively serve the needs of the location, whether it's first responders, it's local residents and businesses, or others that are ultimately going to utilize that deployment, that cell tower. Now, the reason that this element matters so much is because I do want to share a few data points about the realities on the ground when it comes to wireless service needs in Vermont. Now, as you all know far better than I do, in a rural mountainous state like Vermont, you know that there are many communities that still struggle with reliable and effective connectivity. But if you pull back and look at consumers as a whole in Vermont and nationwide, on the other side, when it comes to current demand for wireless services, and when I say that, I'm talking about the amount of data that we all use on our phones and other wireless devices every single day. That is growing exponentially every single year. And I'll give you an exact data point on that. In 2024 alone, consumers used 132 trillion megabytes of data. Now, that may seem like a large number. That's 30 trillion more megabytes than the year before. And if you look at a graph of how much data we use every year, it is growing exponentially every single year. And that's the case in Vermont. And so for us, the most effective way that we respond to that reality is by investing in infrastructure. And so for our providers, that has amounted to approximately $30 billion every year in private funding since 2018 to grow the networks. But at its core, these investments do very much depend on reliable and predictable state and local siting policies. And so that brings us to this conversation today about Vermont's 248A process and the bill that Representative Sibilia has put forward. And so I do really want to emphasize, if I leave you with nothing else, it's sort of this phrase, and that it's Vermont does have in place a predictable, workable, and I would say well-balanced framework for wireless siting that's reflective of those realities that I just outlined. You've all heard from a number of government officials I know and staff about how 248A actually works. I do want to emphasize a few elements of what they've shared that speak to the requirements that are in place right now in the state of Vermont. And so, as you know, current law gives the PUC the ability to ensure, and if you could say requires us to ensure that our companies comply with environmental and historical impacts. The 248A law says specifically that any project, quote, cannot have an undue adverse effect on aesthetics, historic sites, air or water quality, public health and safety, or scenic corridors. Going beyond that, applicants are required, and I know there's a lot of discussion about this, applicants are required to provide that 60 days advance notice. And that's not even talking about the actual timeline of the application process. We have to provide that 60-day advance notice to the National Resources Agency, Transportation, Division of Historic Preservation, and the Department of Public Service. Now, the last piece that I really want to emphasize is that we do also feel strongly that it protects the important role of municipal governments and communities in the siting process. And so on this final point, I do think it's important to emphasize what that means in practice, not from my perspective, but from what is in place in the 248A statute. There's nothing in 248A now or in the future, as we understand it, that changes the fact that states and local governments maintain jurisdiction over siting applications from wireless providers. And so specifically, as you learn, any affected municipalities or regional planning commissions and local landowners have to be given the 60 days notice of even an application being filed. They can request local meetings. And then this last really important piece is that the stance and position of local governments is given that substantial deference on any siting project. And so, again, all these provisions exist in current law and we believe speak to the well-balanced framework that's in place in Vermont. I'll just close here with saying on one final point, we support House Bill 527. Again, thank you to Representative Sibilia for bringing it forward. The bill would enable a 3-year extension. We would support a longer period. I know there was also discussion of an outright elimination of the sunset. I did emphasize at the top, deployment of a cell tower, it is not a speedy process. 3 years is quite a short window as it relates to the predictability for our members when it comes to this kind of work. But again, support House Bill 527 or a different type of approach with the sunset or elimination. So thank you for the opportunity to present. Again, appreciate the ability to do it remotely and happy to have a dialogue here.
Questions for Rep. Howard?
So before you make a 60-day application, you've already done some pre-investigation as to the feasibility, location, and you may even entered into some land contracts with landowners prior to making the 60-day pre-notification?
Yes, thank you for that question. So on the last piece, I would have to get back to you in terms of, I understand what you're asking about, contractual agreements with landowners. I cannot speak to that level of granularity on your question. More globally, I would go back to what I shared that, this isn't the type of thing where it happens in a matter of weeks or a matter of months. And so, what I understand from our network, people out in, that do this work out in the field is that yes, there's significant amount of advanced planning that's done. Because at the end of the day, I will also go back to that substantial deference piece in 248A. It is in our best interest, if ultimately our members want to site a tower in a location, we ultimately obviously want that approved. And so if the local municipality or other stakeholders are, voiceful in their opposition, that carries a lot of weight as far as we understand it in Vermont law.
I think one thing we heard earlier, and this did actually really resonate with me, is that the PUC does give substantial deference to municipal plans, but the quality and I guess level of detail of those municipal plans is all over the place. So some towns have great municipal plans, some towns don't. And I know that's not, I'm not really asking you to reply. I'm just saying that I think that's reality in Vermont.
I appreciate the feedback on that. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, Chuck Kim.
It is a little bit side topic. Can you explain, or do you know how cell companies earn money off of towers? How does building towers help cell companies? How is it economical for them? Can you explain?
Yeah, absolutely.
Conceptually,
Absolutely.
anyway.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Conceptually, anyway.
Yes, thank you for that question. So, and I know, again, similarly, I know there was some dialogue about this in the earlier session. So, at a core level, carriers, have customers, they have subscribers, for individual carriers, and so, they make up a core element, obviously, of each of our companies. If you subscribe to, AT&T or T-Mobile or Verizon or any other type of provider. But I do think it's important to also add, if a tower is owned by an infrastructure company and not owned by a carrier, then there's often contractual arrangements or agreements between the tower company and the providers that utilize the tower.
Well, so the companies that utilize the tower are paying rent or something to the tower owner in that case, right?
Customarily, in fairness to both sides of that agreement, I'm not sure if they technically refer to it as rent, but there's some type of contractual agreement. Yes, sir.
Some sort of fee. Well, anyway, but I guess what I'm trying to understand is a cell company, AT&T, let's say, I have AT&T, I pay them a certain amount every month, whether they build another tower or not. So how does building another tower, how does that help AT&T, except that it increases customer satisfaction by not having, more dead zones? So I guess I'm just trying to understand the economics of it.
No, I understand your question. Really, I think it's important to really keep in mind the direct through line between connectivity in a community and that demand number that I spoke to just a moment ago. And I'd be happy to provide this to the committee after the fact, but we have a graph, that CTIA has published that shows the amount of wireless services. We all, I think all of us have a cell phone, in that room. And if you look at the amount of data that we use on whether it's the cell phone that you have in front of you or any other wireless device, and multiply that by, all the constituents and folks in your community, that amount of data that's being used is going up exponentially every single year. And, the best way to think about it is the amount of wireless infrastructure needed to support that amount of traffic as those numbers grow is staggering. And it's not just, your constituents, it's public safety, first responders, and, the wireless needs that they have, and local businesses. And so, again, at a core level, I understand your question completely. What is the positive outcome for your constituents as a result of this 240? Oh, yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
An outcome for the cell company is what how do they earn more money by having more cell towers?
Well, each consumer has a plan with an individual cell carrier, and that costs a certain amount of money each month, and the services that those carriers provide, whether it's how many devices you have and the amount of the flexibilities that every type of plan that a consumer has with whatever provider they have is, there's a cost built in with that. But I do think that comes back to your original question of what is the purpose of these cell towers and what are they doing now and into the future? And they're serving those needs of your constituents and your consumers, because that amount of need is going to continue to grow. It is continuing to grow.
Okay, well, I guess I'm still not really understanding, but I'll let it go for now. Thank you.
Competition. If I could follow up on that, is it fair to say that AT&T makes more money when they put up a new tower in two ways? One is because it expands their footprint, so there are more customers who have access and can sign up, so you get new subscribers. And two, existing subscribers get better service, so they're less likely to jump to Verizon. Is that a fair summary?
In terms of the financial question, I will defer to our individual members. What I will say to your question is the needs that exist right now here in January of 2026 as it relates to the wireless consumers in Vermont is not the same as what will exist a month from now or a year from now. They are going to continue to grow. And there's infrastructure needed to be able to do that, whether, regardless of the amount of providers that are providing it, the needs from constituents, from businesses, from first responders will continue to grow as it has been for the last decade.
Yeah, Rep. Howland.
Would it be fair to say that a cell phone uses the tower of its strongest source? So by adding a additional tower, the load then gets shared between two towers rather than one.
Yeah, so I understand the question. I am not a network engineer, first and foremost, but I have the same understanding. I understand what you're getting at of how does this functionally work. The best way that I think you can think about it is, when you are in a location where, if you're in a sporting event stadium, if you think back 5 or 10 years ago, when, what was, if you're at Gillette football stadium at 5 or 10 years ago, how responsive was your wireless device compared to where it is now? And I will tell you that is a good example of where the infrastructure has grown and the devices that we use and the speeds that exist on our wireless networks continue to get better every single year. But there is a cost to that, and there's an infrastructure need to be able to do that.
Tori?
I'm just curious if I don't know as much about telecom. Is there any public disclosure of your build out plans? Or is the only way the state knows is when we get these 60-day notice things? Like, because it is essential infrastructure, right? I'm just wondering, like, a lot of our essential infrastructure, we have planning mechanisms, and so we can know what's coming down the road. And that's a key part. And I know we have a telecommunications plan in the state, but it's not clear to me what information comes from the providers that could assist in planning work.
No, I understand the question, Representative. First and foremost, I think it's important to keep in mind that, our members are private companies. And so at some level, there's a competitive element to it, and how much information is shared in that regard, I think, is an important piece to keep in mind here. These are private entities. But at a core level, I will go back to, it wasn't just a platitude that I shared early in my testimony. It's in our best interests for these deployments to be effective and be successful and serve the communities that they're serving. Because these are not low cost investments that they are ultimately making. I will also share, that I do know that our members often share the types of investments they are making in individual states or individual communities as well.
But probably not those long-term build-out plans, because as you mentioned, these are private companies and they don't want to tip their hand to their competitors about where they're planning to build and when.
So that's a fair question that I'll defer to individual companies to answer, but I do think it's also important to point back to that the wireless needs of Vermont and individual communities continue to evolve every single year. I mean, at a core level, a cell tower is a static deployment, and then our companies look at what are the needs 1 year, 3 years, 5 years down the line, but ultimately they need to be nimble as well.
Okay. Thanks. Do we have any other questions for Jeremy? Great. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. It's like Ryan is up next.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair James and Vice Chair Campbell. Thank you for having me. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, my name is Ryan Clark. I am the External Affairs Director for AT&T here in Vermont. I live in New Hampshire, so not far away. And unfortunately, I can't be there today because I've been requested to be in Portsmouth for another commission meeting this evening. So I'll be traveling there. But thank you for allowing me to testify remotely. I am testifying in support of House Bill 527. AT&T's ability to invest and expand coverage in the state of Vermont efficiently and reliably is extremely important. Since 2022, we filed more than 166 of these applications to the PUC via Section 248A to improve our network, to upgrade our network. And then that includes more than 75 of those certificates of public good that we've received in 2025 alone. So that just shows a little bit of the breadth of how often we're using 248A to improve our network, to add coverage. And importantly, that's not, a new cell tower every single time. We filed for 75 applications in 2025. Those can be upgrades, as you've heard from previous testimony. They can be, small cells. They can be new cell sites as well. So it kind of runs the gamut of all types of coverage improvements for us. But Section 248A is, again, an extremely reliable process for us to use, and it works very well. Without 248A, we would expect the process of permitting a cell tower or an upgrade to double, in time taken to do that permitting process. And that would significantly reduce our ability to plan and to invest and improve our network in the state of Vermont. Between 2020, and just to give you a little bit of a look at kind of how much we are investing, in addition to kind of the previous numbers I provided, between 2020 and 2024, we invested more than $90 million in our network. So it's a substantial amount of money that we are planning and using from a capital perspective to improve our network for Vermonters, for our first responders and public safety. We've got a significant commitment to public safety in Vermont for our FirstNet network, which is our public-private partnership with the federal government. So it's really important for us to make sure that we have a reliable avenue to do our permitting processes. It not only is important that we have that reliable avenue, but we are really committed to building, those strong relationships with our communities here in Vermont. We make it a priority to follow all of the rules to make sure that we're doing all the notification processes effectively and publicly. If there are any concerns from the community, any requests for hearings, we always make sure that we're following all those rules and making sure we're hosting those events. Our customers live in those communities, and we're not in the business of alienating our customers by, going around and building towers or, building them against a butter's wishes. And that's an important piece of the puzzle for us, is making sure that, if they need a second balloon test, if there is an environmental study that they need, to have greater assurances that we're following all of those rules. And we have. I can think of a number of cell sites that we're actively trying to build right now, where we are working with the departments, working with abutters, and really actively engaging them, and sometimes on a daily basis, to make sure we're working to fulfill all of their needs and make sure if a project needs to get changed, we change it. So it's not something that, we have these meetings and we host them, or we go to a public hearing and we don't take that feedback. More often than not, we are adjusting original proposals, particularly if we've got, say we have a search ring in a certain town. We'll adjust and fine tune and tweak until we get it just right. So that way everybody involved feels good about the situation, and then we go out and build our tower. So it's a really important piece of the puzzle for us to make sure we're working with the towns and the municipalities and the PUC to find mutually acceptable solutions for our equipment. And I'm working to summarize my testimony. I have submitted full written comments, so that way you can have it. But I want to close, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I know I don't want to reiterate too much of what Jeremy said and what others have said, but 248A is extremely important to our investment strategy. We see it as a reliable tool that we can use to make sure in the long term we know what we're dealing with and we know how to permit. Supporting H527 is easy for us to do. It's extending the sunset. It's, again, something we find very valuable, and we appreciate Representative Sibilia for submitting it. The only additional we would encouraging the committee to consider permanently extending the sunset, permanently extending it, or even out to 5-7 years would add a lot of value. Again, that just provides that reliability in our investment strategy. As you can see, if we're investing over 4 years, $90 or so million, that number I expect to grow. And we are committed to building out our network in Vermont for the communities, for first responders, for students to learn and educate remotely. And having that sunset out even further just provides that additional level of assurance to the company that we know, all right, we can plan for this because we've got a strong permitting process in place. So I'll close there. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I know there were a few questions that had already risen that are maybe more suited for the company specific as opposed to the trade association. So I'd be happy to answer those.
Great. Rick Campbell.
Sure, thank you. So you mentioned supporting eliminating the sunset or stretching it out more than 3 years. One idea that has occurred during the course of the discussion is eliminating the sunset for the de minimis projects. You heard testimony that represented about 90% or so of the applications in a typical year. Yeah, applications through 248A. Is that, and then perhaps stretching the sunset out a little bit longer for the intermediate and large projects. Would that provide relief to a company like AT&T? Would that be a valuable thing?
I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, any sort of extension, whether it's de minimis or the new construction, I think would be valuable. We would certainly appreciate it, any sort of extension, because it just provides that reliability. We'd like to see it for everything, but if we start by piece by piece to add extension, I think that would be valuable.
Okay, that's interesting. I also asked Mr. Crandall about the economics of cell towers, and I think he would defer to the companies in particular. Is the way that AT&T justifies the expense of building towers? Is it just competition with other providers? I mean, you don't earn money off of a tower per se.
Right.
Would be my guess. So is that really what it's all about? Just competition with other providers?
Correct. I mean, I think if you look at it, the telecommunications industry is an extremely competitive environment. I mean, we all see all the advertisements on the television. It's a unique industry because we all are battling over, very small amounts of customers who are either willing to transfer or, willing to switch carriers, or new customers who are getting the phone for the first time and are looking for a phone subscription. So having the best network possible is extremely important, and I don't want to speak for the other carriers, but extremely important for AT&T, because it allows us to keep the customers we have, and ensure that they're not going to go trade in their phone and go to a different carrier. But it also allows us to go after new customers, because we can prove and show that our network is capable of fulfilling their needs. And as Jeremy said, those needs continue to grow. So yeah, we're not making any money off of that specific cell tower necessarily, but it allows us to go after customers, which is where obviously where we build them, and then we get our money from that.
Got it. Thanks. So what I'm wondering is, what would grease the wheels for AT&T to invest more in filling in some of the dead zones that we have? We have a lot of dead zones in Vermont. It's difficult, with a lot of hills and trees and everything. It's a hard place to serve. But especially along major transportation routes, it seems like it would be really to have a lot fewer dead zones. So what would help AT&T incentivize AT&T to build in those dead zones? We heard. Just add one thing. We heard from the PUC representative that I think something like 50% of the dead zones in the state could be filled with as small as a 50-foot tower. So, which maybe the size of the tower doesn't have an awful lot of impact on the cost, but it sounds like it would be a relatively modest investment in order to be able to fill at least a significant portion of the dead zones that we have.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good question. I think 248A allows us to do that, right? 248A is an extremely important piece of this puzzle. But when we're looking at building out our network, we often look at dead zones where we don't have coverage. A big part of what we've been doing, I would say since 2018, to look at some of these areas that don't have coverage, is through our FirstNet partnership with the federal government. FirstNet and the federal government and the state of Vermont have requested certain areas that we go target and build, and they tell AT&T where to go, and we go out and build those towers. So that's a part of filling in the rural puzzle for AT&T is FirstNet, and working to make sure we're filling in the gaps for public safety, which in turn helps our commercial users as well. So that's a big part of filling in the gaps. But I think at the end of the day, providing the best coverage possible and covering this entire state of Vermont is a goal. I mean, AT&T's slogan is "Connecting changes everything," and making sure our customers are connected wherever they are as much as they can be is our goal. And so we're going out, and our network teams are constantly assessing the network to see where we need to go build, and using the capital that the company provides them with to go out and build that in Vermont. And I'd like to say we could cover every inch of it tomorrow, but we go step by step and keep chipping away at it. And towers are expensive to build, whether they're 50 or 100 feet. I don't know if going to 50 feet, because it's not just the material that gets you from 50 to 100 feet. It's all the expense that goes into, all right, we're paying our lawyers to do all the permitting. We're paying, the network engineers to do all the, discovery of it. And then, the contracting with either a tower company or others to go out and engineer and build it, and let alone bring fiber out to that tower and energy backhaul. So when you factor all that in, it's not the 50 feet that's preventing us from going wide. It's I don't know if that's the answer to build a ton of towers at 50 feet, but hopefully I could answer my question or answer your question in there somewhere.
Yeah, thanks. Just one quick point, and that is, we also heard that the FirstNet build out was pretty much done, except maybe for one tower that's still to be built. Is that correct?
So that's the first 5 years. So we had a contract with each state, Vermont included, from 2018 to 2023 to build out towers in the state. That original contract was extended because of certain difficulties at a few remaining cell sites. That contract is still ongoing, and we have 1 to 2, but I would say specifically one location that proves to be difficult, but we are continuing to make progress and working very closely with the departments involved, who are well aware, and we're providing updates on a monthly basis to them of our progress. But the FirstNet contract will continue on. We've got a 25-year contract with the federal government to provide public safety with access to FirstNet. And so
more FirstNet towers coming then.
Correct. But that's the federal government. So the FirstNet Authority is now they have additional reinvestment dollars, and we are at this point waiting for them to release those federal funds to AT&T, and but they will tell us where they want. So it's another round of funding, and they'll tell us where they want us to go build towers in Vermont. And that's a partnership with the FirstNet Authority and the state of Vermont, who are working together to identify those locations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Rep. Sibilia.
Thanks. Thanks, Ryan. I have a couple of questions around public process, public input. And I'm thinking, I first want to ask you about that 1 or 2 towers, FirstNet towers, that you're having difficulty with, and what that's about, broadly speaking, the difficulty.
So that would potentially take, a half an hour to go through all of that. I'd be happy to follow up and have a further conversation with you. The primary tower that I would say has been difficult for us to cite has been Granville. It's a tower located in Granville. There have been a number of issues around, and I don't want to go into too much detail because I'm not doing that work on a daily basis. It's primarily Will Dodge, who is one of our attorneys, who's been conducting that on a daily basis. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to testify today, but I'm sure he'd be happy to fill in some more information on this as well. He is intimately aware with each step of the process, but it has revolved around environmental studies, abutters, land use, and easements. So we often will do an easement. So if we say we're going to be using land in a certain area, then
that's fine, Brian. That's enough. That's actually you've answered my question. What is there any different requirement? You're able to use 248A for the FirstNet towers?
Yes.
Okay. And then we had asked a question this morning. I don't know if you have any familiarity, given that Vermont has Act 248A for siting. Are you aware of differences in the public process and public's ability to engage between Act 250, which would be what we would default to if 248A were not here? Are you aware of that, or able to speak to that, or not really?
Not really. I think that would probably be best again for Will Dodge, who uses 248A and is intimately aware of that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Yep. Yeah. I think okay.
Just a quick question. Could you just on your big towers, can you give me approximate an investment cost from start to finish, to build one of those towers?
Yeah, unfortunately, there really isn't an average cost because each tower is so unique. I mean, we could have a location like I mentioned in Granville where it is the cost is significant, and I don't even want to in the millions of dollars to build that one location due to all of the fees included. Or we could have a co-location that is straightforward. And I would say we prefer co-locating whenever possible. But that is a straightforward process that, I would say is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to add our equipment to. So it's a significant swing of cost based off of the location, the terrain, how far do we have, how far is the nearest energy provider, how far away is the nearest fiber provider. It is a significant range.
Thank you.
Do you have a current map of your coverage area in Vermont that you can provide the committee?
I could provide a public map. It won't have granular detail on each specific cell tower, but I could provide a map. I believe that we could make public. I would have to check with our team internally though to make sure that that's appropriate.
Okay, that would be appreciated. You can do that.
I'm sorry, can I ask? That struck me as a slightly curious answer. Like, don't you publish maps of your coverage in your promotional materials?
Yes, we have maps of our coverage, but like I said, I want to check if our network team would be comfortable doing like a cell site map or just a general coverage map. I'm not sure on which, if how granular detail they would feel comfortable because it is all proprietary information, as we've said. So I would just like to get feedback from our network team about what they would feel comfortable sharing, but I would be happy to share some level of detail, certainly with the committee.
Great, thank you.
Rep. Allen?
When you say available cell, fiber, you don't put in your own fiber from your own terminus somewhere to bring it out to a site?
Correct. We do not own fiber, is my understanding in the state of Vermont. We use fiber providers to bring the fiber backhaul to our cell towers. In other states where we own the fiber network, we would use our own fiber, but that is not the case in Vermont.
Would you know who those cellular or the fiber providers are?
Can you repeat your question?
Do you know who the fiber providers are? Are they your competition that you're?
Not typically our competition, no, because they're providing a different service. I could get a list of the fiber providers that we use in Vermont, though.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Do we have anything else for Ryan? Okay. Great, Ryan. Thank you so much. Stephanie, welcome.
Hello. How is everybody this afternoon?
Good. Thanks for joining us. If you could just identify yourself for the record.
Of course. Of course. So my name is Stephanie Lee, and I lead government relations for Verizon in New England and have been working in Vermont with Chris Rice, who's in the room with you, for about 7 or 8 years. We appreciate the opportunity to testify today. And being busy legislative season, have multiple states, I had to be in another state this morning, so didn't have enough time to drive up. But so fortunate to have this opportunity to talk to you and happy to answer questions. If I could say ditto to most of what Ryan presented, I would, because as our competitors are investing, companies do not want to be left behind, right? So Verizon also has been investing heavily in Vermont. I want to start with, first of all, we support House Bill 527 and are really find the Section 248 process very helpful as we are investing in our network assets across the state of Vermont. It is one of the better processes, I will say, because it streamlines things at the state level. It provides an effective framework for the deployment of our facilities while also balancing out the opportunity for municipalities and other stakeholders within the community to weigh in. Verizon has been invest millions of dollars each year, and in fact, it's tens of millions each year, and in at a similar amount. And I don't want to do the Me Too, but what AT&T is doing, we're investing at a similar clip every year because states like Vermont, there's a couple things happening. One, we've already talked about it. It's a big state. It's a mountainous state. It's a rural state. So there are still areas that need more coverage. But at the same time, as Jeremy talked about, where we have population people gathering and a lot of usage, people are using the network even more, right? More terabytes of data every single year, and it's growing exponentially. So while we're expanding coverage, we have to also balance where we're building capacity, especially in areas where lots of people are gathering, whether it's for work or recreation. Like you'll see that in areas like the ski resorts or near the colleges or hospitals and other places where people gather. But in addition, it's really important that we're getting to more and more people around the state because, as you know, in a place like Vermont, some of the more rural areas have not had the investment that some of the more suburban or urban areas have. So our goal is also to help bridge that digital divide. And since 2020, we have ramped up investments in the state, and we're continuing to invest significantly in the state so that we can get to more places. And it is one of the things, our goal is to get everywhere. We're very proud of our contiguous coverage, but there's still work to do. We know that the connectivity, especially in rural states where there's a lot of recreation and people are outdoors and doing a lot of activities, that it's also a public safety issue that people have that connectivity that they need. So we want to make sure that there's a framework that continues to be in place that will enable us to continue to invest. One of the things that I did want to point out as well is that we would like to see the sunset either extended or eliminated altogether because wireless providers like Verizon are taking a long range view of our network requirements. So to kind of get to some of the questions in the discussion earlier, we look out several years and try to map out where we might go based on the information we have at a given point in time. And then we chip away at making those investments. It's hard to really forecast out 5 years because usage patterns change. There could be more demand somewhere because all of a sudden now there's, more population in an area, that more development going on in an area that hadn't had development before, and we have to be able to pivot. But the longer range view, having a process that doesn't sunset in 3 years can help us be more predictable in our long range view and actually achieving the goals of that capital plan, and helps us budget year in and year out much more predictably. So again, happy to answer any questions. I appreciate the opportunity to testify, and I want to express support for H527. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Rep. Campbell has a question.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sorry to jump in right away, but I have to. So the question about whether just eliminating the sunset for de minimis projects, maybe you heard that when I was talking to Ryan. Is that a provision that would be very useful to Verizon?
I think anything is helpful, but a point I do want to make is the projects that take a longer period of time and are much more complicated are the mid-size or larger tower projects, especially when you're going to new areas where we don't have as many facilities and you might need to site something new. So those projects can take under the best of circumstances, they can take 3 years from inception to actually bringing that site on air. That is not unusual, especially in an area that might be mountainous or very rural and you don't have access to the fiber or the power sources nearby.
That's a very good point. So what would be, if we did decide to extend the sunset out beyond 5 years, but wanted to keep a sunset for purposes of keeping the legislature engaged, and especially new members, we have a lot of turnover every 2 years. New members engaged in the process of analyzing how it's going. What, in your view, would be a good time horizon? If not, if it's beyond 3 years, would it be 5 years, 6 years, or?
I don't think there's a magic number, but I do think 5 years creeps up pretty quickly. 3 years really comes up quickly. And you see it too as a legislature, because every session you have to address this, whether it's, in the middle of the session or at the end of the session. So 5 years would be helpful, but more years would be even better than that, I think, so that it gives a little bit more runway and a little bit more of a predictable path. There's not a magic number. I'd say more than 5, but you have to do, what you feel comfortable with. And I think some of the experts at the PUC and the Department of Public Service might have some ideas on what they think is appropriate based on the work they have on their plate.
Great, thank you.
I have a similar request that I made to Ryan, is if you could provide us with a coverage map of Vermont for the Verizon network, that would be much appreciated.
Yes, and just to answer your other question, we do have general coverage maps available on our website that customers or potential customers can put in their addresses and see if there's coverage. Where the nuances are is, sometimes there'll be coverage in your neighborhood, but the back corner of your house might not have coverage. And I think we've all run into that. Or even inside your house, you might not have coverage. But we do have maps available online. I can provide that, and I will check with our network team, as Ryan is doing, to see if we can provide something that's a little more granular than what you'll see, which will look like, if you look at the state of Vermont, it's going to look like coverage is almost everywhere. But then you'll say, wait a second, I know down the street from my house or at my kid's school, they don't have very good coverage. So let me see what we can provide. But I'll also make sure a link is available. So if people just want to play with what's available online, they can do that.
Thank you.
Anybody? Great. So I think we've heard clearly. I mean, we have, there are 3 divergent paths here. If the legislature takes no action this year, then it's our understanding that the no more applications could be filed under the 248A process, and it would, I guess, by default, revert to Act 250 and municipal decisions. If we pass 527 as introduced, we stay with our current vibe of taking another look at this every 3 years. And then I'm hearing the wireless providers requesting, supporting the 3-year, but also requesting a longer time frame, out to 5 years or something, or maybe even eliminating the legislative review and the sunset altogether, which I think is an approach that they're taking a look at in the Senate. So I think I'm clear on your preference. Does anybody have any more questions or comments? We were taking a look at maybe voting on this next week, some week. I think we're looking at voting on this maybe as soon as next week. Okay, great. Thank you all so much for joining us. Appreciate it. And I think, why don't we stay live just for a minute to hear if committee has any conversation. Anybody have any? I already mentioned, is there anybody else we want to hear from? Love to hear any comments, questions, concerns folks have, or if people are starting to formulate opinions.
But I have a follow-up question to something that came up regarding first. I believe one of the testimonies had said that the FirstNet Authority at the federal level works with the state of Vermont to help pick locations for future towers. And I'd like clarity on who that is. I'm assuming it's the department. At the department. No.
Department of Public Safety. It's Corey. He testified here last year.
Um,
Do you want to learn more about that? We can invite.
yeah, if possible.
Okay.
I mean, it's building out the network is a crucial issue, whether we won't need to deal with it. You know, we don't, with this bill,
Okay.
if we want to get it out next week, I think we could do it another time, but I think that's a crucial issue for us to look at moving forward is how we, fill in these dead zones for public safety. And I didn't realize that, someone from the state actually has input into that process. I'd like to find out how substantial that is, what that process looks like.
Okay. Could you please send a testimony request to Alex, find out who it is you want to hear from, and she'll try to plug him in, and obviously we'll move the committee vote if we haven't taken all the testimony our committee members want to hear. That's not set in stone. I'm just trying to make sure we keep things moving along this year. That's all.
Sure.
So if you could send that to Alex.
Can't remember his last name. Department of Public Safety. They may know it. Yeah. AT&T may know it. Yeah.
Corey Chase.
And Corey Chase
Public Safety.
at the Department of Public Safety to testify on H527 and in particular any possible intersection with FirstNet. And Chris, you can explain in your email what you'd like to hear about. Okay, Rep. Powell?
We heard from I guess we call them the two big carriers. What about these small carriers? Are they just using AT&T and Verizon systems and just sub-marketing them so that we don't need to hear from the other smaller carriers? I know they advertise on the radio and TV once in a while, and I couldn't even quote you a name of one of the companies.
Yeah, we can invite them in. Would that be ILEC?
No, the ILECs are
No,
the
the ILECs are the telephone
are the
companies.
small independent telephone exchanges. That's what ILEC comes from.
That's right. So, who would that be? I'm a little out of my wheelhouse here. We would invite or.
T-Mobile have a network here.
Well, that were the type of things, T-Mobile, I don't know that,
Consumer cellular.
and I listen to radio from around the country. And because I can, but I mean, some of those services aren't here, but there are other small carriers that advertise. I don't know if they're available in Vermont. If you
T-Mobile, I feel like I'll have to look back through my emails, or maybe Alex could. That might have fallen into a little bit of a transition gap between Committee Assistant Joe leaving and Committee Assistant Alex starting. I feel like we invited T-Mobile.
They basically said that they will agree mostly with everything that's said here today. They just didn't feel like it was necessary to come in.
That's right. That's right. They did say that. You're right. They basically said CTIA can speak for them.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And then I don't know who the smaller carriers would be in Vermont or how to find them, but if we can, there might be folks in the room who would know. Are there smaller carriers that we?
Crickets at the state.
Crickets?
Cricket.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Can we get a list of who CTIA represents?
Jeremy? We're just having a little conversation about whether there's smaller providers in Vermont we should hear from. Do you have smaller providers that belong to CTIA that are providing in Vermont that we could reach out to or that you could help us find?
Yeah, so I've been listening to the dialogue. Can I get back to you relatively quickly on that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
I know you guys time is of the essence, but let me get back to you, but I'll follow up quickly along with Claire.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
No problem.
So, 527 is our only question, the sunset question. These other questions about dead zones and notice for copper are separate from 527. Is that accurate?
Notice for copper that's definitely separate. And we're going to be drafting a committee bill on that we talked about a little bit. I keep trying to remember the buckets too, but I had requested a committee bill on the copper question that we'll have a look at next week. So that is a different bucket. It's up to us, H527 is pretty simple. It just extends the sunset 3 years.
Yeah, so, it's very hard for me to imagine that a carrier of any size would advocate for keeping the sunset or making it shorter.
Right.
It's just very hard to imagine. 248A is an easier process, it's a faster process. So why any carrier would oppose that is close enough to impossible for me to imagine, so that I would not think we would need to hear any more testimony from carriers on that. So the question in front of us is, what is the benefit to the public of our revisiting this every 3 years or every 5 years or every 10 years or ever? And it's not a huge amount of work to submit the bill to extend, I take it, Rep. Sebelia?
Done a few times.
Done it a few times.
It's pretty quick.
Yeah. It's even less work to put a notice on the calendar 6 years from now to say, hey, discuss whether you want to sunset this provision and make it permanent, and then just talk about it every 6 years instead of putting in a new bill. So
How would we do that?
those are my thoughts. How would we do?
What if none of us are here in 6 years?
Well, the calendar will still be here. We put a notice on the calendar and it pops up as a reminder to say, hey, talk about this.
What calendar is that you speak of?
What is this calendar you speak of?
Yes, the committee Google Calendar,
Yeah.
or whatever the equivalent there is.
The sunset is how we do that. I don't think there's any other way to do that. We can't bind, for starters, we can't bind a future legislature in any way. So the only way we can make sure this gets revisited is to keep the sunset in there.
And we can send a note to the future saying, hey, talk about this. Well, tonight.
No.
Rep. Torrey?
I want to pick up on the input that the department collected from the public in terms of how they are able or not to participate fully in citing decisions in their towns. So they crafted a report, which I haven't read. It's on the old environment page from 2024. But I do feel like another possibility, if we were to not have the sunset anymore, is to ask the Department of Public Service to regularly do that surveying and update and make recommendations to the committee if there needs to be tweaks to the participation in particular piece. Because, that's kind of our job, right? To make sure government's working for Vermonters. So that's, I think all of us might want to just look and see if there were actually recommendations in that report. And then we're going to have the League of Cities and Towns in the year.
Yep, we have remaining testimony at this point is Vermonters for a Clean Environment, League of Cities and Towns. If we can find some smaller, a smaller provider or any smaller providers who might want to come in. Did we get the Hunter may have Alex may just have forwarded us. Let me look and see what it was. Some follow-up testimony from Hunter.
He linked me the drive test map, and then the report that he was referring to is uploaded on our website.
Oh,
But I can also send
is
it.
does it say 2023 report on the process citing?
Sure.
I have it, right.
Let me look on our website real quick. Don't see it. Alex, did you load it under reports or under today's testimony?
It should be under reports.
Okay, if you could also put that under today's testimony, under Hunter Thompson, that would be great.
Sounds good.
And I've got it if you do, I can send it to you.
I suppose it's true that if we are adjusting the sunset one way or another, we could also adjust the public engagement process. Is that accurate?
I think that we can tinker with the statutes. We could, yeah.
To address some of the concerns that were expressed early in the committee, and also to express what we heard as public feedback that they didn't feel they were kind of really engaged.
The other thing that's a bit of an X factor right now is so I don't know for sure. So if we do nothing and we revert to Act 250, basically, that's one possible outcome of all this, right? We do nothing, we revert to Act 250. Because that's one of the three possible pathways that could come of this whole discussion in the legislature this year, I want to make sure that House Environment looks at this bill, because they are our Act 250 experts and our land use experts. And it, to my mind, this is it's a digital infrastructure bill, but it's also a land use bill. Where we put things is I'd love to have the Environment Committee weigh in on that. So depending on what we do, I guess what I'm saying is I don't want us to get out on too thin ice with Act 250, because that is definitely not our area of jurisdiction or expertise. So that's just in my mind.
Yeah. You're up first.
Yeah.
So in that vein, just so that this committee is apprised, I wonder about getting an answer to that question we asked Greg that he didn't have, about the difference in the public process between 248A and 250. I'm certain that Annette will give us her perspective. I wonder if we can get attorney, I think we heard Will Dodge, one of the attorneys that probably has perspective on this, or someone else like that.
Sure. That's a good idea. So the difference in the public participation process between 248A and Act 250, and you want to hear from somebody at APS? Is that what you said?
I think that they told
Or
us.
PUC?
I think they told us they didn't have that information. So it would be good to have an attorney who has gone through that.
Well, maybe Ellen's. Maybe that's a ledge council thing. Alex, sorry, we are doing this in real time.
Okay.
Can you please reach out to Ellen at Ledge Council and see if she thinks she would be the best person to walk us through the difference in the public participation and public engagement process in Act 250 versus the 248A process? It might be her. Those are both in her area of jurisdiction. I don't know. Yeah, Brent.
I'd like to pose a question to Mr. Clark from AT&T, if I might.
Brian?
Hello. Yes, I'm still here.
So you had said that if 248A sunsets, you'd expect the process from initial interest to getting a tower up and running to be meaningfully longer than it is now. And I wonder, do you have a sense at all for how much of the extra time is due to the public engagement process in Act 250 and how much of it is due to other factors?
I wouldn't specifically. I would defer again to our attorney who does this on a daily basis, Will Dodge, who uses 248A to permit all of our cell sites. So he would be able to answer that question, I believe.
I'm trying to figure out how much of the speed benefit of 248A we are willing to give up in order to give the public a greater opportunity to participate. As we have heard, there is an interest in. So that's going to be a trade-off. And
I think, I just want to say, I'd asked everybody for their opinions. So I can tell you, my opinion is that it's a really important trade-off. It is not one to take lightly because right now, if we were voting today, I would vote for the bill as is. I would do another 3-year extension. I do not think we should make the statute permanent. I think we need to keep revisiting this. And, but I'm also very nervous about eliminating a process that providers have told us is allowing them a faster and more expedited way to make sure that towers get built. Because I don't want to inadvertently become the state where nobody can put up a cell tower. And our citizens can't get connected and they can't get coverage. And we're seeing, a broadening digital divide because we've made it so hard to put up a tower. And so to me, the 3-year extension is that middle way. I want to make sure the legislature keeps returning to this. I want to make sure the public has a really meaningful chance to engage. But I've also seen just in my own community what feels like an inability to get a new tower put up, and people are really frustrated. So that's not great either. So. Yeah, Richard.
I've heard in some of these processes at 248 that the person on the ground who's either in part of that owns the land around it or near it or whatever had a minimum in the 248 procedure. That when it moves to 248, it's mostly lawyers talking to lawyers, and that they're not really hearing. Should we hear from somebody who's been trying to get something on the figuring out what they went through during this process to either get input in on siting the tower?
Yeah, we have that next week,
I
right?
mean, I think Annette is that we have that tomorrow. Actually, why don't we see what Annette has to say?
Okay.
And then, because in my mind, that will be the really valuable perspective that Annette is bringing. I think. So, but if after we hear from Annette, you want to hear from like an abutting landowner who actually tried to stop the tower, I don't think there's any harm in that, or had questions about a tower.
Wanted to just say only needs to be moved 40 feet this way or 100 feet that way, and
how that went.
And they got roadblock or didn't work at all. Or
yeah, I think that'd be really valuable.
Because, it's interesting when you try to translate the public engagement process from how it looks on a flow chart and how it looks on the web to actually trying to do it as a citizen. And I know that there's
I've heard that they say there's public engagement, and then you hear people out on the street saying there isn't any public engagement.
Well, it's that kind of does relate to the consolidated bill that we're talking about, where, it's easy to read that there's public notification, but when you dig in and find out what that actually looks like, it's a packet arriving by mail. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, that this issue came up in my district, my first term. My district had a bill that made some tweaks to 248A around public participation. One easy little example is instead of having, right now it states that if the municipal bodies, select board or planning commission, request a public meeting, they will have one. And my district mate promote, suggested instead that there just be a public meeting that the provider holds. So you don't have, just because there's different awarenesses, different priorities in different towns. So I don't know. I mean, there could be some tweaks that are not like huge, but still make access and timeliness better for the public at large. So that bill, if you guys want to see it, I can circulate it to the team, to the committee.
If I might, it does in fact feel like holding one or two public hearings, not adding 6 months to the timeline. Might add a week.
Right.
Madam Chair, thank you for sharing your opinion so explicitly.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
if we're to vote next week,
yeah,
it's important to me to know where people stand
Yeah.
because I don't want to bring it to a vote and have no idea how it's going to turn out.
right.
That's not great. So I want to know if people want, if people are like, there's nothing you can do that will ever make me vote for this. If we hear this or that testimony, I'll be ready to go. Here's what I feel. I think we should eliminate the sunset entirely. I mean, I really can't bring it to a thoughtful vote until I get a sense of what people need to hear and how folks are feeling. And if it's too early to know, that's great too. But
Well, I can share where I am right now. I'd be slightly inclined to just get rid of the sunset, but if we are to keep it based just on the cycles of how long it takes to build these things, I think 3 years is not enough time. And, would extend it to 6 years or something like that and be perfectly happy.
okay,
Oh, are we doing a straw poll?
no,
I mean, I support the bill that I introduced. I'm interested in this concept of another public hearing. Open to going to the other committee.
okay. Yeah, I don't want to put folks on the spot. It's not a straw poll. I just want to get a sense. Can we vote this out next week? Are we completely divided? Folks can talk to me offline too.
I think that there seems to be, not consideration for the aesthetic value, that sometimes the people don't know about the tower till they see it up in their view shed. That they're not in a butter, they're nowhere near it other than that they can see it on the side of the East Mountain or West Mountain, whatever they call them in Rutland.
That's a hard one to give a visual for though.
And well, no, but that's the regional planning commissions, the separation between the municipality and something that's on a town line, near a town line. The abutting town is only 600-700 feet down the road. Do they have any input? That's what I get from my people who think they haven't had input in some of the sightings of I mean, the guy who gets a rent every month because it's on his land and he didn't have to sell his land, he keeps it, check comes in every week.
That reminds me of another question that maybe we could ask these folks who are still with us. The towers that are made to look like trees, I guess, are more expensive. Is that so? And if so, how much more expensive? Anybody still online who can address that?
Hi, Jeremy.
I can't address the actual cost of the poles that are designed to look like a tree aesthetically. I do just want to, I mentioned this briefly in my testimony. The aesthetic element though, which is exactly what, if you build a tower and the requirements are for it to look like a tree, that's essentially aesthetics, what we're talking about. That is included in 248A. That the 248A deployment can have an undue impact on aesthetics. So that doesn't answer your question, sir, about cost, but that is included in 248A. That element.
So that would be then an opportunity for an abutter to, I don't know, raise an objection due to aesthetics, and the resolution could be, well, we'll make it look like a tree. Is that what you're saying?
That is my interpretation. You know, I would defer to DPS and the PUC as to what that, you know, negotiation or that conversation looks like. But not but and you know, Vermont 248A specifically cites aesthetics as something that needs to be considered in order to get that certification of public good.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I don't know
Yeah.
if Ryan has any thoughts about the difference in cost, just as a percentage or proportion?
I do not have a specific number on how much the cost is of a tower that looks like a tree versus a normal cell tower. I'm sure there's some additional cost potentially to make those changes, but I could certainly try to get back to you with a specific number.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Rep. Sabili?
Yeah, Madam Chair, just to share maybe a little bit of thinking based on my experiences here in the building, thinking about Director Thompson and the PUC's comments this morning about how this sunset has really blocked kind of full scale adjustments to this bill or to this language and or rulemaking. And so I do not, I am not in favor of no sunset. And I would just say that if we start tinkering around in here, we might want to make some time to really do some wholesale looking at this. And it sounds like there might be some pent up demand for, and that could be quite time intensive.
It would be extremely time intensive.
Yeah. So once we start monkeying around, I think there'll be a lot of appetite for changes from a lot of parties. Which may be what we should do.
I already said what I think we should do.
Just one issue that, and it is an issue, just to let you know what happened in our town when somebody wanted to put a tower. They actually had them put a balloon on it.
Yeah.
And strung it up to the height that the tower is going to be, and let it sit there for a couple of weeks for people to go into how question this. They don't know it's there till it shows up. This would at least have maybe alert them that this is where we're thinking of siting one and this is how high it's going to be.
That's actually, that's a question I had for Jeremy, I guess, or maybe it's back to the PUC on this. I can't remember whether a balloon test has to be requested. I've seen a balloon. I've seen a balloon test in my town. Does a member of the public have to request a balloon test?
So I get exactly what you're asking. I would defer to the PUC or DPS on that. I was trying to rapidly look at 248A as we speak, but I would defer to them and or we'll get back to you on our end.
Okay, that probably is a PUC question. I feel like we talked about it too. I feel like it's buried in my notes somewhere about what order. I feel like it has to be requested, maybe, but I don't know. So, all right. Anybody else? Okay. Well, just keep keep sending thoughts and just to be clear, we're voting this out next week if we're ready to vote this out next week. I just, that was my thinking. I feel like we have a lot to do this year. So I wanted to get it moved along, especially knowing that we have competing Senate bill and that it's going to another committee.
This bill's going to another committee, or the Senate bill is going to another committee?
I think our bill will go to environment. House. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it'll go to our Act 250 experts. So I think it'll
Unless we just extend the.
No, I think it'll probably.
Either way, it's gonna.
Yeah, I think they're gonna want to review it either way.
My concern is that we don't put a roadblock so that we don't build anymore, that we have a moratorium on any additions. I think Commerce has got to be involved in to get communications out to where we don't have broadband. And like they said, the amount of people that do a lot of digital work on their telephones, and they may not be able to do that with inadequate coverage now. So the small 50-footers or whatever. And what we didn't hear, the smart meters of the world, when they were employing those, they commuted device to device to device. I don't think that does it. Your cell phone in your pocket doesn't rebroadcast out to another user. You're independent all your way, but the antennas may do that of antenna, so that they don't have to be 200 feet in the air, but they can be a series of 50s. And I don't want to say yes to a bill that would preclude those 50, or say no to a bill that would preclude those 50-footers from cascading down the road.
Maybe that's issues that are separate.
Yeah, I think
at this
that,
point.
yeah, like,
I think I'd like to dig into that, but it might be too much for this bill.
yeah, I think it's I think this is a complicated issue that we could spend the entire session on and address no other bills. And I want to make sure we don't do that. So I am trying to keep us as focused as we can on just, I don't want our committee to do, personally, I don't want our committee to do nothing. Because then we lose our voice. Something's coming over from Senate, right? I mean, we've got a bill on the wall. I want to vote it out. Because otherwise we have abdicated. I think this is our committee jurisdiction. You know, we need to take testimony here. It'll then go to our House Environment folks who have all the expertise and all the background on Act 250 and the Act 250 criteria and the public engagement process. I do think it's important that we understand just for ourselves how the 248 public engagement process and criteria stack up against Act 250. And then we can move our bill along, staying solely focused on, I think the choice for our committee is not to do nothing, but whether to pass out the 3-year sunset extension, make it longer, or add any minor notification things we think would fit neatly right into Act 248. Like, you also have to do this. And then we'll send it along, you know, to our colleagues.
So
Yeah.
3 years ago, this was just in the environmental committee.
Yeah, and then, is that timing right?
Yes, we were all combined.
Environment and energy. And then 3 years before that, it was probably in energy and technology.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Because the
before that, it
committees
was in
have changed.
Commerce. It was
And before that, it was in commerce.
I believe. Yeah, I think it was in Commerce. That sounds. Yes, because broadband was in Commerce.
So that means we can bump it to a different committee for the next 3 years.
That develops.
Okay. All right, I think I have a handle on the additional testimony folks want, but it's helpful if you email me and copy Alex. In fact, I would say it's more than helpful. I'd say it's imperative to email Alex and copy me on specific requested testimony with who you want to have in, their contact info, and, you know, the bill. Because there's just a lot going on in my inbox. And I don't think it's fair for us to request Alex to just be sticky noting everything. Okay, so if there's more testimony you want to hear, send it in an email, please. And it's helpful if you have the person's name and contact info. Okay. All right, that was good. Good talk. Good talk. We can go off live. And then we are done for the day because we have floor and